Good morning. Happy Shushan Purim. As we go to the Chitas of today, today is Monday. We're holding in the chapter Pashas Tzav. We're holding in chapter 6, verse number 12. God spoke to Moses saying, "Their carbon Aaron, this is the sacrifice that Aaron, Uvanov, and his children, Asher Akiva Hashem, that bring a sacrifice to God, B'yom Himoshach Oisai, on the day that he is invested, anointed. Asira Se'efa, he has to bring a tenth of an ephah, Silas of flour, Mincha Tamid, a perpetual meal offering, Tamid, perpetual, Babayker, Umatzisa Be'erev, one in the morning and one in the evening. She says ordinary kohen must also offer a meal offering consists of tenth of an ephah of flour. On the day they were inaugurated into the service, the kohen gadol, however, was bring this meal offering every day, as it says, a perpetual meal offering. The kohen who's anointed instead of him for amongst your son an eternal stature. Amachvas b'shemen te'asa shall be made of oil in a shallow pan. Murveches tevena, after bringing scalding and repeatedly baking. Tinefena minchas pitim, this is called an offering of broken pieces. Takir shall be brought leach nechayach, as a pleasing smell, aroma Hashem, to God. Now she says this is boiling water was poured over it, over the dough, until it's thoroughly scalding. Tinefena, baked many times over, namely after scalding it, he bakes it in an oven, and afterward he fries it in a shallow pan. This is extremely well-baked matzah. Minchas pitim. Now she says this teaches that it requires breaking up. It requires to break up. Kohen Mashiach tachtav, and then the kohen who be anointed after him. Ibana from his sons. Yasa Isa, he also should do this. Hashem, this is an ever law to God. Kolol tikta, it's completely burnt on the mizbeach. This mincha is totally burnt on the mizbeach. Now she says this is to be understood that as the kohen who is anointed from amongst his sons instead of him after he passes away. Kolol tikta, when there was a kamitza procedure, what is scooped out is burned on the altar, and the remainder is eaten by the kohen. However, in this offering, there's no kamitza procedure to enable any remainder to be eaten, but instead it's burnt on its entirety. Similarly, volunteer meal offerings brought by a kohen must be completely burnt. So the difference between a regular Jew bringing a mincha and a kohen bringing a mincha is by a kohen's mincha, it's totally burnt. Kol minchas kohen, as the verse says, kol minchas kohen, kol tia, every meal offering that a kohen brings, kol tia, it's completely burnt. Lo yisiyachal, it cannot be eaten. Ash says it must be equally offered to God. So God spoke to Moshe, Adam, speak to Aaron's sons, Lamer, saying, this is the law of a sin offering. In the place that you shech the oila, tishchat the chatas, which means in the north side of the altar. Kodesh kadoshim, it's a holy of holies. Hakeina machta isa, the kohen who offers it, ichlena, he has the right to the carbon. The makom kodesh tiyachal, it's eaten in the Beis Hamikdash. Chatzar el in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. Now she says, "Amachta, one who performs the competent in the service, meaning one who through whom it becomes a sin offering, is called amachta isa. Amachta isa yaklena. Now she says the kohen who's fit for the service. This comes to exclude a kohen who is unclean at the time of the dashing of the blood, who does not take a share in the flesh. But it's impossible to say that this verse prohibits other kohanim from eating, except the kohen who dashed blood, as it says further." Any male amongst the kohen may eat. So it means that a person who's available for the service of a kohen can eat. Verse 20, whoever touches the flesh of this animal becomes holy. And if any blood sprinkles on the garment, the area which the garment has become blood, needs to be washed in a holy place in the Beis Hamikdash. Now she says, any food that touches it and absorbs by it becomes holy. Yigdash, what does it mean to be like it? And that impsulative soul, if it becomes invalid, then it's not valid to eat. And if it's valid to eat what it touched, then it becomes, you have to eat it like the law of the schata, so you cannot take it out of the Beis Hamikdash. Rashi says, Shayaza usually what's sprinkled, which means the blood was sprinkled on the garment. Therefore, Rashi remarks that the asher is in this case if it was. If someone of it blood sprinkled on the garment, the area of the garment which has been sprinkled, it must be washed in the courtyard of the temple. The word yaze is a passive form, meaning to be sprinkled. And thus here, the phrase asher yaze means upon which it is sprinkled. Verse 21, and an earthen vessel in which we cook this meat, because the kohen needed to eat it. You cook this meat, it shall be broken. And if you cooked in a copper vessel, it should be purged and rinsed with water. Now she says because the absorption, having the absorbed vessel become nicer, that's the problem. Well, if you use an earthen vessel for this food, then the earthen vessel becomes absorbed by the chatos, by this sin offering, and now anything that's left overnight, it's called nicer. You cannot have it, so you have to break it. So the food remains within the vessel. Like anything, that's why it's hard to kasher earthen vessels. You have to even kashering, it's a problem. And subsequently, the time limit for eating the sacrifice expired. The absorption, the vessel, is leftovers. Since nicer leftovers must be destroyed by burning it, the food in the walls of this earthen vessel must be destroyed by breaking the vessel. Same law, breaking earthen vessel which meat of sacrifice have been cooked, applies also to all holy sacrifice, not just in sin offering. Because any sacrifice that is prohibited nicer, which all sacrifices are that way, it depends how many days, 1 day or 2 days, but ultimately every sacrifice has a law of nicer. So if it was used in an earthen vessel, they had to break the vessel. If it was used in a metal vessel, like a copper vessel, then you have to kasher it, to put it in boiling water. Umeric, Rashi said, expression was stemming in the same root as with the anointment the anointment of women, substance used to cleanse perfuming union. Umarak v'shatav, this is the expel its absorption. This is the case of metal vessel, but a earthen vessel, scripture said already, you have to break it. Verse 22, any male amongst the Kehanim, eat from this carbon, Kodesh Kodashim, it's holy of holies. So Rashi says, which you mentioned before already, from here we learn that the kohen who offered up the sin offering shall eat, stated above in verse 19, does not come to exclude any other Kohanim, but to exclude one who's unfit. That's what the pasuk means. You have to be fit to do avodah. So even to do the service, even though you didn't do the service, you're still fit to eat from the carbon. Verse to sacrifice. Verse 23. And any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting, the chape b'kodesh, to bring sanctified, to anoint the holiness, shall not be eaten, but shall be burned by fire. Now she says, what does it mean over here? This verse teaches us if one brings any of the blood of a sin offering to be sacrificed on the outside altar, inside the holy, brought it for whatever reason, the kohen by mistake. Because the regular sacrifice, the blood is not brought inside, only a sacrifice of the Jewish people, and Kippur, the sacrifice of the kohen gadol. But a regular sacrifice, sin offering, is not brought the blood inside. So whatever, the kohen made a mistake, and he brought the blood inside, now the sacrifice becomes invalid. The whole sacrifice needs to be burnt. This v'chol the rabbis kashai kach going to include other holy sacrifices that are brought to not only chatas, but any other sacrifice. The blood is brought inside the Beis Hamikdash comes invalid. Chapter 7, verse number 1. This is the law of an asham, sin offering. An asham, Kodesh Kedoshim, an asham is a sacrifice he brought that he didn't know. It's called a guilt offering. I mean, I'm not sure the Veda if I didn't have Veda or I didn't do it Veda. I'm sure the Veda I did. It shall be sacrificed, but the animal substitute for it may not be sacrificed. Rather, it remains in the pasture, and the pill it's defective. So if you made a tmura, then that means you flipped it over. Another animal, for whatever reason, the animal needs to pasture and he dies natural death. He cannot use it. The place you bring the oila yishrat as hashim, you should bring the offering of the hashim. He shall dash his blood up on the mizbeach. Now she says yishrat too. It's an interesting word over here. They shall slaughter. It's a plural kind of word. By using the plural verb yishrat too, Taylor is telling us come to describe many slaughters. It has included the case of a communal guilt offering, which many slaughtered for many. However, since we did not find a case of communal guilt offering mentioned in Taylor, the verse is understood somewhat differently. It uses a plural pronoun as it links the guilt offering and the burnt offering, where we did the case of a communal sacrifice in order to include also the communal burnt offering in the requirement that it be slaughtered in the north sector of the temple courtyard, thus as required as in the burnt offering. And this is all in Taylor's Kainim. This is all in the Gemara. Verse number 3 is called Chal B'Yaakov, and all its fat you shall bring. Mimena from it is the aliyah, the tail. Was a chelav and machasa kerev, and the fat that covers the innards of the animal. Not just until here, the sacrifice bites of the guilt offering had not been mentioned. This is why the Torah needs to say it over here. However, the sacrificial price of the sin offering have been already delineated in Parsha Vayikra, and that's why the sacrifice parts are not meant delineated in the section described in the law of a sin offering in the previous verses. Esa Aliyah, the case of a peace offering, the Torah treated as sheep and the goat offering to two separate entities, remember last week, by specifying the sacrificial procedure of each separately. Why then no distinction is made between the sheep and the goat in the case of a guilt offering? Since for the guilt offering, only a ram, an ayil, or a lamb, a kevis, may be brought. The rams and the lambs are included in the category of those animals whose tails is one of the sacrificial part. There was a distinction was made to sheep. No distinction was made between sheep and goat, but over here between ram and a sheep, they both have fat tails. And you take off the two kidneys along with it. The fats with the kidneys. And the flanks. You said it's a covered, and the diaphragm with the liver. You should take it with him. The kohen will bring it on a sacrifice on a mizbeach. Ishe la Hashem, it's a fire to God. Asham hu, this is a guilt offering. Now she says Asham hu, meaning that the guilt offering, until its name removed from it by sending it into pasture. This teaches us concerning the guilt offering whose owner has died, or whose owner has lost the original animal, subsequently received atonement through another animal. Although the original guilt offering animal stands ready, that its value in money used to buy another animal is to be offered up al eilas kates hamizbeach, the burnt offering which was provided on the altar. Nevertheless, its original guilt offering was slaughtered if it had been done before they sent into pasture. Actually, the law, these are very difficult laws. You have to go to the Gemara, really. Actually, the law of the animal, in these cases, the animal is sent out to pasture, so it becomes blemished and consequently unfit to sacrifice. Then it's sold, and its procedures used for the burnt offering for provision of the altar. However, Rashi tells us that the status of a guilt offering is removed from the animal as soon as it's sent to pasture. even before it becomes blemished. This is a expression of who Hashem. This is a guilt offering. It does not come to teach us that guilt offering becomes invalid if it was sacrificed for another purpose, other than the guilt offering, as they expound on the word he, in the case of a sin offering. That is because in the case of a guilt offering, Torah states the guilt offering only after the sacrificial price have been burnt. And if you say that the verse teaches us the guilt offering must be sacrificed for the specific purpose, not for any other, then this law must be included also in the procedure of a burnt sacrificial parts. That they too must be burned for the purpose of the guilt offering. However, we learned in the Tractate Zvachim that in case of a guilt offering, its sacrificial parts are not offered up at all. It is valid. All males of the Kahanim shall eat it. The Makom Kodesh in a holy place. The Achal shall be eaten Kodesh Kodashim Hu to the Holy of Holies. The Rashi says all this has been stated and explained in Torah's case. This sin, like a sin offering, so is a guilt offering. It's one law. The kohen who affects the atonement shall belong to him. This matter, meaning a kohen who's fit to effect of anointment, atonement, takes share in it. This excludes one who's immersed himself on a day for his uncleanness, who may not perform the sacrifice service or eat the holy until sunset, one lacking atonement, if he did not yet bring the sacrifice the day after the immersion. So all these people, Kehanim, they're not fit to do the service. And one whose close relative died that day, he's an Einin. All these people are disqualified from performing the Kohen. He's disqualified for doing the service that day. And since he's disqualified, he cannot have part of the korban. Verse number 8. And a kohen who brings up the burnt offering of a person. This is something very important to the kohen. Gemara says the Kahanim got very rich from this. All the skins that ultimately sold to write Sefer Teiros, tefillins. This was a high. Everybody wanted these skins, and they became wealthy. Prat Rashi says this excludes one who immersed himself again. That it has to be these items were given to the Kahanim of whoever was doing the service, but he had to be fit to do the service. Meaning, if he was a kohen that was unfit to do the service, then he did not get it. Any mincha that you're going to bring, a tanner in the oven, anything that's done in a shallow pan, that belongs to the kohen, a makavesa that brings it. Again, now she says, she's bothered that you shouldn't learn this, that it belongs only to one kohen, the person who brings it. One might think it belongs only to him alone. Therefore, the Torah again says that doesn't go. It belongs to everybody. Any meal offering shall be brought to the sons of Aaron. One might think that indeed it belongs to all of them. So therefore, the Torah says it belongs to who offers it. So how can we reconcile it? It belongs to a family of the day when they offered it. The Kahanim were divided in 24 divisions called Mishmerish, watches. Each watch begin the duty of the temple service for 1 week. Each day of the week, a different family Kahanim for that week was on the duty. When Kahanim offered up an Azilai Mila offering, it was shared equally amongst his family. Even though not the whole family brought the mincha. One Kohen brought it maybe. But the entire family, whoever was working that day in the Beis HaMikdash, could eat from this mincha. He had the right to take part of the mincha. Chol minchas below Hashem, and any meal offering mixed with oil, gareva, or dry. Chol b'nei Aaron tia shall belong to sons of Aaron. Ish ke'echav. Each person, everybody has an equal share in this korban or in this mincha. And it belongs to whoever is in the service. The only problem is that he has to be valid to do the service. If he's impure that day, then he's not called a kohen that's valid to do the service. Therefore, he did not take part of the sacrifice. This is what you do with a mincha. That's a gift, so to say. A person wants to give it a dava mincha. But chareva is something that's dry. This is the meal offering of a sinner. Meal offering of a jealousy was sacrificed during the investigation of a saita, a woman. He didn't put any oil and no frankincense, right? So there was certain minchas, like a saita, when they came to check out if a woman, if a person did a sin, infidelity. So that was mincha saita. Was never. They didn't have any kind of what do you call it? Oil. So it was very dry. She'ein Bashem and had no oil. And this completes the Chumash for today. We continue with the Tanya of the day. We're holding in the middle of chapter 37 of Tanya. Alter Rebbe says, Shkol HaNeshama V'Nefesh Elikis, the whole Neshama of the divine soul, Shebechlal Yisrael, in all of Israel. Salekes Pratis Shipshinib, standard figure of the members of the Jewish nation. All individual souls begin further subdivision to subdivide of these 600,000 general souls, as we'll explain. So the 600,000 general souls that went out of Mitzrayim, which is the general souls of Am Yisrael. As we know, the Alter Rebbe says these 600,000 souls can be subdivided into 6 times 600,000. So there's a lot of souls, abilities of millions upon millions of souls. Skayim kol neb, but we need to go. It all goes back to the 600,000. Now the 600,000, Skayim kol nefesh prat is called Taryag. This 600,000 were given to Torah. 600,000. We're talking about more because each soul was subdivided because each one had a wife or two. So it was actually more. Really, was 600. There was 600,000 men. But you're only a half a nefesh without your spouse. So we're talking about 600,000 more than 600,000 with the general souls. With each one had one soul. So we have 600,000 general souls. The Eibishter gave the Torah and mitzvahs to 600,000 general souls, and now he wanted that each one of these neshamas should do tayag mitzvah Torah. Each one should do 613 commandments. Shasal leisisa, he wanted when they were refined from the transgression, lahafish asag gidim shel adam nefesh the 365 negative commandments to restrain. So you have 248 positive commandments, and the 365 negative is to restrain the 365 blood vessels of the animal soul in the body, so they not draw in nature or receive vitality by the means of this such transgression. Rishalish klippas atmei is the garment which come from when they come from klippa, the 3 unclean klippas totally, they cannot be elevated. Which derive, which in essence the Eibishter says, I'm giving 365 powers in the world. That if you do it, you're gonna give highest to this power in the world. The Raisa, and they have 365 negative commandments, and they have many offshoots, rabbinical offshoots. So since all that derive its vitality for the 3 unholy klippas cannot rise to holiness, where a Jew to transgress any prohibition and thereby cause a particular blood vessel associated with that prohibition to receive vitality from that klippa. So now we have a problem because basically we gave vitality through this Aveda to a certain klippa, Now you understand why this world is full of klippas. Whether I did the Aveda intentionally, whether I did the sin unintentionally, I've given power and existence to klippas, to coverings and tumah, to impurity of the world. And what happens? What's the real problem? The real problem is that since my soul is connected to this situation, now my soul has been sundered. Put a wall between my soul, my godly soul, and its source. So now my godly soul is impossible to have aliyas in neshama. If it became impure with one of these impurities. Now, how do I do that? Then chas v'shalom, that these sins will never let my soul have its elevation. Unless you nullify it and utterly destroy it. That's tshuva. But ultimately, a person has to go through Gehenna, the concept of hell, to cleanse these tumas, to cleanse these impurities, to break this wall. Because there's a wall, there's a covering that I've put upon my soul. So how great my soul is, there's a wall. And hopefully it's a thin wall. So therefore it's easy to break. Which as it's written ultimately, what's going to be the ultimate concept in the world? That ultimately God's going to take away tumah from the world. So similarly, anything derives its vitality from them can never ascend to holiness. Therefore, only the observance of all 365 prohibitions allows the entire vital soul to ascend without any part of it held back by impurities of such clippers. So therefore, it says a person should do tshuva, shouldn't wait, should do tshuva, repent, break the wall. Tshuva is the breakage of the wall. The breakage is a separation between my godly soul and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's number one. Every Aveda, God forbid I do, I create a wall. I create a division. Chas v'shalom, through my many Avedas, I can create a very deep wall. And I need to break this wall. Mach mitzvah say, then the Eibishter gave 248 positive commandments. Which according to Kabbalah Chassidus, is why are you doing a mitzvah? To bring God to the world. So every mitzvah brings God to the world. What happens if I do a mitzvah when I bring God to the world? And that elevates himself, elevates the godly soul to bind and to unite with him the entire vital soul, which has 248 limbs of the body. So there's 248 mitzvahs of the godly soul connected to the full 248 limbs of the body. Because not only does my godly soul connect to God, it's my 248 limbs, my physical limbs, which is my vital soul, my nefesh habahamis, becomes united with God. The yichud gadmut, such as the effect of mitzvah is uniting the vital animal soul with God. So they become actually one with him. Shem echad. I become one with God. Why? Because I let my body, my neshama, live through my body. Baruch Hashem. I let my godly soul use my body, use my physicality, use my 248 limbs for davar shebekdusha. That automatically, now my body becomes united with the godly soul, which is united with God. So that's it, the way you look at a mitzvah and Aveda. A mitzvah, I unite with God. Not only my godly soul unites with God, my body, my animal soul unites with God. And an Aveda, God forbid, does the opposite. Which all of it is butter. And in accordance with that was the whole purpose of creation. That was the whole purpose of creation. When according to the will of God, Liisle did it, but that to be a boat for him in the lower realms in this world. And so great is this unity that they, the limbs in the body, with the vitality of the animal soul invested in them, become a chariot for God, as it were by the patriarchs. So I become like Avram Avinu, whose every limb was totally submission to the divine will. Therefore, they were designated as God's chariot. So I'm not going to be Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was 24/7. I'm not capable of accomplishing that, but I'm capable of becoming a chariot for a minute, for a moment. So will every Jew become a chariot by performing mitzvahs. And that's the greatness of Avraham, the greatness of Avraham Avinu, that he did it on his own. The greatness of us, that we have a mitzvah. We don't have to do anything on our own. We have the vessels. We have the Eibishter gave us, the Eibishter God had a desire, and he gave us all the kalim. He gave us all the talents and everything that we need to accomplish the mission. Avraham Avinu never had any commandments. He had one commandment, to circumcise himself. He was already 99 years old. Yitzchak Avinu, every Jew, the Eibishter gave every Jew the Torah. Every Jew has the Torah. And I gave it to them, a Matan Torah, to 600,000 souls. And he wanted that every Jew, as the Alter Rebbe is going to continue, he wanted that every Jew would do 613 commandments, do 248 positive, not do, because the concept is to bring godliness to the world. You cannot bring godliness to the world if you're going to create a wall. So therefore, you have to have two things. The Eibishter needed both. 240 positive to connect the world, to accomplish Dira B'Tachtenim, that God will come into the world. And he needed 365 negative, not to bring impurity in the world, not to make a wall, not to create a covering. Because the more coverings Chas Shalom you create, the more you have the separation. But the whole purpose of creation is to bring God to the world. You cannot accomplish that because you have this covering. You have this wall. You have to break through the wall. And the breakage of the wall suffers is tshuva. I need to do tshuva. If Chas Shalom I did a sin, intentionally or unintentionally, I need to do tshuva. And the tshuva is going to break the wall. Once I break the wall, there's nothing separate from me and God. And therefore, I can accomplish the Dira B'Tachtenim. I can accomplish the concept of the elevation and the descent. As we learn in Chassidus, that there's a concept of elevation, there's a concept of aliyah, there's a concept of yirida. Everything in life has a concept of a forward and a backward. I have a concept to go higher, and self-understood, the purpose of going higher is not to go higher and higher. The purpose of going higher is to bring it down lower. The higher I go, the further I can go in the lowerness. You see that in normal way, the higher you are, the further it falls. In a positive way, the higher I am, the further I can go. The further I can go, the further I can accomplish Dira B'Tachtenim. The further I can accomplish the concept of godliness coming down into the lowest realms of the world. And I need to ultimately accomplish that on all levels, on levels of Pshat, Remez, Dursoiv, on all the levels that God gave the Torah, besides giving 365 commandments and 365 negative commandments, 248 positive commandments, he gave a Torah, which has itself 4 levels. Pshat, Remez, Drush, Stoid. He wanted every Jew should go into these 4 levels. The level of simple understanding, Remez, which what alludes to Drush, to the expounding of the Torah, Stoid, to the hidden aspect of the Torah. And that was the purpose of this 600,000 souls, which the Eibishter gave them the Torah. And as the Arizal said, that ultimately the Eibishter gave the greatest thing, that the Neshama has the capability to reincarnate and to come into to break up, as we learn that the 600,000 souls can come 600,000 different souls. And why? Because we're Pashut fulfilling, accomplishing the original 600,000 souls. We're trying to bring about that all these 600,000 souls on all its levels will accomplish what they were given at Matan Torah, the journey, the purpose, their mission that the Eibishter gave Am Yisrael at Matan Torah. And therefore, everything goes back to us, to Matan Torah. Everything by a Jew goes back to Matan Torah because everything started there. The purpose started there. The journey started there. Everything will be accomplished, what was given there. That's why it says, Ein Chadash Tachas Hashemesh. There's nothing new under Moshe Rabbeinu. Kol Sinai Nitna. Everything was given about Mount Sinai. The journey of Am Yisrael, the journey of every soul, every particular soul of this 600,000 souls. Their journey was given a Matan Torah. We're still trying to accomplish thousands of years later, we're still trying to accomplish Matan Torah. We're still trying to accomplish the mission, the vision, the purpose of why the Eibishter created the world. That every single one of these souls would bring down a Dina B'Tachtenim, would make for God a dwelling place in this world that could not be accomplished if there wasn't Matan Torah, if there wasn't Har Sinai, if there wasn't revelation on Mount Sinai. We would never be able to accomplish this mission. The mission is accomplished because the Eibishter simply gave us all the tools. He gave us 630 commandments, and he gave the Torah, and he gave everything. That's all that the Jew needs to do, is to accomplish this mission. And when he accomplishes this mission, he's not only accomplishing it for himself, he's accomplishing it for the journey of Am Yisrael. He's accomplishing it for the beginning of the 600,000 souls that went out of Mitzrayim. He's accomplishing it for Klal Yisrael, not only for the Klal Yisrael of today, he's accomplishing it for Klal Yisrael, the thousands of generations that are waiting for this Jew. And that's why the Rambam writes that every Jew to look at himself as they can on a scale. One mitzvah can simply bring Yeshua L'Olam. One mitzvah will bring redemption to the world. Not only redemption to the world right now, redemption to the world for the past 3,000 years, which every generation, as we know from Moshe Rabbeinu, every generation, Moshe Rabbeinu was the generation that went out of Mitzrayim, had one yearning, and that is to come to the Eretz Yisrael, to come to the land of Israel, to build the Beis HaMikdash. And as we know, it's brought down that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael for one reason, because he knew that if he would go into Eretz Yisrael, the Mashiach would have been there already. It would have been over. The journey would have been done, accomplished. Abishah said, no, we need the journey needs to continue. And the journey does continue. We have to hope that we complete this journey, Baruch Hashem, and we bring Mashiach to the world. We bring revelation to the world, and we break the Ruach, as the Alter Rebbe writes over here. As you know, that's the ultimate, that the Eibishter will ultimately take away Tumah from this world. And what's this thing of Tumah? Tumah is lack of revelation. When there's Tumah, you cannot go into the Beis HaMikdash, you cannot eat all these stuff. Tumah is a concept of separation between a godly soul, between a Yid and a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ruach HaTumah Avim and Aretz, the Eibishter is going to get rid of impurity from the world. The impurity won't be in death in the world. There'll be Chaim Nitzchim, revelation in the world like we never saw before. We saw it to begin with at Matan Torah, when the Eibishter gave the mission to Am Yisrael. And the mission will see it, Be'ezat Hashem, when God again takes away the impurity in the world, and we'll see complete mission of Gilui Elokus, revelation of godliness in this world.
Yes.
That completes the Chumash of the day, the Tanya of the day. Today is the 15th day of the month, Shushan Purim. Say that Tehillim chapter 77 and chapter 78, and you do the Chitas of the day. I wish you a happy Shushan Purim. God bless you all. Let's hope the Simcha in Yerushalayim today brings about the ultimate Simcha by Klal Yisrael, becoming a Mashiach, Meiri B'Yameinu. And Amit Shem, if that doesn't happen today, I'll see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. We'll continue the Chitas.
No, he's